Do any of you know where Prague is? Well, Prague is a beautiful old city in the Czech Republic, which is a country in Central Europe. And many, many years ago, there was lots of turmoil and fighting that was going on in Prague. And the story that I'm going to tell you today has to take place during that time. Once, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, in 1580 to be exact, there was a large Jewish population that lived in the Jewish quarter of Prague. Now, during this time, there was lots of turmoil and fighting that was going on in Prague, whether it be between the Czechs and the Germans, or the Protestants and the Catholics, or as it was at the time of our story, between the Christians and the Jewish people. Now, it was Passover, and every year at Passover, the same thing happened. The Christians would torment and mock the Jewish people in the streets, calling them names. They would break into their homes and steal things, and sometimes Jewish people were even thrown in prison for no good reason. Well, the rabbi who ran the synagogue in the Jewish quarter, Rabbi Lowe, was a very intelligent and loving man, and he cared very much for the Jewish people that lived in Prague. And every year at Passover, he wondered and worried if there was anything he could do to help keep the Jewish people safe. And every year, he wasn't able to come up with anything. But one year, he was sitting up late at night in his study, and he was reading from an old Jewish mystical text. And he came across the story of the Golem. Now, the Golem was a giant clay man who could be created in times of great violence and stress in order to help keep Jewish people safe. "That's it!" cried Rabbi Lowe excitedly. "This is the plan I have been looking for. All I need to do is create a golem to help keep the Jewish people safe." And so he ran next door to his neighbor's house, Yaakov. Now, Yaakov was known for being an easily confused and rather lazy man, and Yaakov was already fast asleep when Rabbi Lowe knocked on the door. But he woke up and got the door anyway. "Oh, Rabbi Lowe, it's nice to see you. What do you want?" "Yaakov, I need you to come down to the Vltava River with me and help me collect clay." "Help you collect clay? Why do you need clay? Can't we do it? It's past midnight. Can't we do this tomorrow when I'm not as tired?" "No, Yaakov, this must be done tonight. I'll explain everything later. Just please come with me." And so they trudged down to the Vltava River and began collecting clay. Rabbi Lowe, how much clay do we need to collect? Not that much, I assume." "Yaakov, we need to collect 15 tons of clay." 15 tons of clay? What in the world do we need 15 tons of clay for? Are you suddenly a potter or something? "No, Yaakov, but please, just help me collect the clay. You'll understand later." And so, after many hours, they had finally collected all the clay they needed, and they trudged back to Rabbi Lowe's study. And when they got there, Yaakov sat in the corner and watched as Rabbi Lowe began to craft something out of the clay. And after a few hours, he realized that what Rabbi Lowe had created was a giant man. "Now, Yaakov, what I've created here tonight is a golem, which is a creature who can help keep the Jewish people safe during this Passover. But please, don't tell any of the Jewish people about this, because I'm worried that they will get scared." "Okay, Rabbi Lowe, that's fine. I won't tell them." Yaakov didn't even honestly know what a golem was. "I'm a bit tired, so I'm going to go back to sleep now." And he left. And as soon as he did, Rabbi Lowe began to put the finishing touches on the golem. He started to carve the Hebrew word emet, which means truth, into the golem's forehead. And as he did, he watched as the golem's fists, giant like boulders, began to stretch, and his legs, thick as tree trunks, began to slowly move. And finally, he opened his eyes, which were fiery red, and stared right at Rabbi Lowe. But Rabbi Lowe wasn't scared, for he was the one who had created the golem. "Now, golem, I have created you to help keep the Jewish people of Prague safe this Passover. And you can stay in my study, and every morning I will give you a list of tasks to complete. And then at night, you can wander the streets of Prague, making sure that the Jewish people are safe. Do you understand?" The golem slowly nodded his head. Well, for a few weeks, everything went smoothly and went as planned. Each morning, the Rabbi Lowe would leave a list of tasks for the golem to complete, and the golem would do them. And then at night, he would wander the streets of Prague, making sure that all of the Jewish people remained safe. Until one day, when the Rabbi Lowe's youngest daughter became very ill. And as most parents do when their children become ill, Rabbi Lowe could think of nothing else. He was so worried of his daughter. And so he ran to the synagogue that morning in order to get all of his work done early, and he completely forgot to leave a list of tasks for the golem to complete. Now, the golem had been alive long enough now that he was starting to understand human actions and emotions and even have some of his own, and he was very angry when he realized that Rabbi Lowe had completely forgotten about him. And so he did the only thing he thought he could do. He stamped down the stairs of Rabbi Lowe's home and broke all of the furniture in his living room, and then he ran outside, picking up sheep and cattle with his giant fists and threw them through the fields, and then he ran into the center of the Jewish quarter, knocking all of the red roofs off of the gorgeous apartments and buildings, leaving terrified people in his wake. Now, Rabbi Lowe was in the synagogue in the center of town when he heard the commotion and ran outside to see what it was. And he ran into a terrified young woman on his way. Rabbi Lowe, there is a giant man who is running through town, and he's destroying our homes, and if you don't do something, he is going to kill someone. Please, you're our only hope. You must do something. And she ran off sobbing. Rabbi Lowe knew immediately that it was the golem that was causing these problems, and he knew what he had to do. As sad as it made him, he was going to have to put the golem to rest. And so he wandered through the streets until he found the golem, and they walked back to Rabbi Lowe's study together. And when they got there, Rabbi Lowe stood and explained the situation to the golem. Now, golem, you've been a great help for the past few weeks. You really have, and you know that I care about you so much because I created you. But I care much more about the Jewish people of Prague, and you really could have hurt someone today, and I cannot let that happen. So I must put you to rest. Do you understand? But as I said, the golem now had some emotions of his own, and he was not pleased. And so he stared at the Rabbi Lowe with his fiery red eyes. No, I like living. I don't want to be put to rest. Well, the Rabbi Lowe was an intelligent man and was still not terrified because he had created the golem. Golem, I'm sorry, but my hands are tied. I can't let you hurt one of the Jewish people of Prague. I must put you to rest. I'm sorry. And so he climbed up onto the table and he began to erase the Hebrew word, emet, from the golem's forehead. And as he did, he watched as the golem's giant fists started to crack and crumble right before his eyes. And finally, the golem was lying silent and still on the table before Rabbi Lowe. And Rabbi Lowe locked the door of his study, never to return. Now, the Jewish people of Prague remained safe for many, many years after this, and they were happy too, and the golem was never reawakened. Until, a century later, when a young, mischievous Jewish boy came across one of the Rabbi Lowe's old books explaining the creation of the golem. Wouldn't it be fun if I could reawaken the golem? All of my friends would think I was terribly clever and powerful. And so he broke into the Rabbi Lowe's old study, and he saw the giant clay, dusty body lying on the table before him. And he climbed up onto the table and he began to carve the Hebrew word, emet, which means truth, into the golem's forehead. And as he did, he watched as the golem's fists, giant like boulders, began to stretch, and his legs, thick as tree trunks, began to move, and finally he opened his eyes, which were fiery red, and stared right at the young, mischievous boy. You're much larger than I thought you were going to be. I don't think I can actually control you after all. I should probably just put you to rest right away. And the boy hopped back up onto the table and swiped the Hebrew word off of the golem's forehead. And just as he did, he realized what a terrible mistake he had made, as the golem's giant fists began to crack and crumble and break into 100 pieces right before his eyes, and the golem's massive body began to tilt and wobble and fell right on top of the boy, burying him alive. And that was the end of both the young, mischievous Jewish boy and the golem of Prague.